Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss of internet shitlords. Here's my cat. I'm not showing any of my usual books today because talking about a subject that you don't really want to associate your books with, which is Zak Smith. That's not someone. That's not something that helps you sell your books. It's like, you're not gonna do a documentary about. I know. Well, about some notorious person and then hope to get positive book sales from that. So the thing I wanted to talk about today is kind of a reaction. It's precipitated by the fact that Zack has, peeked his head out of whatever rock he's been hiding in for the last little while. And he made a blog entry that normally I wouldn't really care what he has to say, except that in this case he's talking about Mike Mearls, and specifically this allegation that came up that involves Mike Mearls and Zack and myself during the time that we were, at the end of the time that we were consultants for Dungeons and Dragons, right? So this is something I've kind of covered a little bit in the previous Zak S video that I've done on this channel. So if you go back and look, there's a video I've done about Zack when the initial allegations came out about Zack having been abusive to his longtime partner Mandy. I spoke there about the role that we had as consultants for Dungeons and Dragons. Now I want you to understand a few things here. And so this is why I'm making this video, in fact. So let's get right to it. First of all, most of what Zack writes in the account that he's done today, or not today, a couple of days ago, is actually accurate. It's all correct. So I'm not here to damn his account of events. I'm kind of here to corroborate for the sake of the truth. I am no friend of Zack's. I think Zack is a false person. He's someone who was, most specifically, someone who complained about the freedom of speech, when it was his stuff, when people were trying to ban his stuff, but has very openly stated that he's perfectly happy with banning the free speech of people that he doesn't agree with, that he doesn't like, So his argument is basically that free speech is something that belongs to him. To him and to people like him and to people that he agrees with and that agree with him, and that people that he doesn't like and whose politics he doesn't agree with should perfectly well be banned. But whenever he gets attacked, whenever some SJWs come after him, then he complains bitterly and invokes free speech and calls for the entire OSR to support him. But whenever somebody else in the OSR gets attacked by the same SJWs, he does nothing to support them. In fact, he condemns them. He even went so far as to go up against James Raggi when the SJWs went nuts at Raggi putting a photo up of himself with Jordan Peterson, right? He's not a person, he's not a loyal person, that's for sure. And he's not a person that has actual values. His values are entirely based on his own narcissism. His perspective on free speech means that he believes that his ideas are so morally right that they have to be defended, that any attack against them is completely illegitimate, and that at the same time that his own views are so morally perfect that he has no problem with taking away the same rights from others that he complains that they take away from him. Right? So you have to be a real goddamn narcissist, right? I mean, people sometimes accuse me of being an arrogant person, but I am aware enough of my own flaws as a human being, which are not just mine. They belong to every human being. Every human being has these same flaws, right? That I know that just like I believe that no one should get to tell me what I'm allowed to do or not, what I'm allowed to do or not with myself and with my body, with what I read, with what I play, I shouldn't get to tell anyone else what they're allowed to do. I shouldn't have that power. Nobody should have that power, not even me. Because inevitably, you can even with the best of intentions, you can get things wrong, but sooner or later, you become someone who abuses that power. Because if you don't like someone, if they're if they're not in agreement with you, then you might convince yourself that they really are so terrible that they need to be censored, they need to be banned, right? So this is something that I've always tried to very much watch for myself. And I mean, so if you've got someone who recognizes that nobody should have this power, and is doing does everything they can to avoid abusing that power, that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is actually someone like Zak Smith, someone who's convinced at his own intellectual and moral perfection, and everybody who's ever seen him knows that he seems to believe that he's tremendously smart when he actually, well, I'll leave it at that. He is this brilliant artist should get to decide what everybody else is or is not allowed to do. So porn is okay because he's done porn, but if you're a right-wing gamer, even if your games aren't particularly right-wing, if people want to ban you because you vote for Trump, that's perfectly fine, right? That in his idea is okay. But all right, I've ranted enough about his views. I'm not his friend. I don't agree with him, and I never was his friend. I was at the beginning of the process of making D&D 5th edition, I was one of several consultants that were consulted and paid, paid consultants, right? As far as I know, from everything I've been able to tell, I was the one that had the largest consultant role, I think. Certainly, Zak's own description in his blog indicates that he had an important role, that he did things, he made recommendations, he like every consultant, I'm quite convinced that every consultant in that list was actually expected to do things for the money they were paid. It was not just about putting their names in the book, right? And what they did was taken in, it was considered, right? So Zak's stuff was considered, and he did have to do stuff, I'm quite sure, because I don't think Mearls would have let anyone get away with just getting name recognition on there or something like that. I don't think that's what he was after. He wanted, I know certainly with me, he wanted the input of the particular skills and the particular perspectives I had. And I'm guessing it was kind of the same with Zak. But the point is, we didn't work together I didn't work with Zak when we were doing the consultancy, right? He was doing his consulting, I was doing mine. Apparently, from what he describes, it was somewhat similar to how I did things with Mike Mearls, in that it sounds as though, like me, Zak only interacted directly with Mike Mearls, who was the person in charge of the big project. He wasn't relegated to working with lesser entities with basically typewriter slaves like Jeremy Crawford or something like that, right? He wasn't working with the lower downs. He was working with the guy at the top and giving his input, right? And now it sounds to me like he did an adequate amount of work, not as much as I did, not as many emails as I have, I think, but that he did it, and then that was it, right? And then several months after the last part of the participation in the consultant work, 5th edition came out, right? The basic edition and the player's handbook here was released. And it was at that point that people who hate Zak and who hate myself, who are sometimes not the exact same group of people, but have an enormous amount of overlap, right? Like most of the people who hate me as the RPG Pundit also hate Zak Smith. And most of the people who hate Zak Smith also hate me. Now, there are a few people that hate Zak, but don't really hate me in the sense that they've never, confronted me. And there's some people who hate me but love Zak, which are the people that are kind of like the pretentious wing of the OSR who love this idea of Zak the artist doing his artist stuff, and will defend Zak but won't defend, me or other OSR people because, they like this idea of the degenerate artist, pseudo-intellectual, making these artistic products that are full of, whimsy and elements of unusualness, of bohemianness, whatever the cost that may be to playability, right? Products like Bornheim, basically. So they like that, and they don't like me, and that's fine, right? But the majority of people that dislike Zak are also dislike me because they're the SJWs, right? The SJWs hate both of us. largely for a number of reasons related to their ideology. Like in Zak's case, it's because he did porn and worked with porn stars, and the feminist wing of the SJW people, they to them that's anathema. That was immediately proof that he had to be stopped, even though he is himself a wannabe SJW. He was desperate to be part of that in-group, and they never let him in, because he runs right into the face of the 21st century Maoism of intersectional feminism that says that pornography and working in sex work in general and working in porn is somehow anti-feminist, right? And then in my case, because I've been a ceaseless advocate for free speech, it was really that, I think, above and beyond anything else. I certainly, part of it was because I'm a kind of an asshole. I say mean things. I pointed out the pretentiousness of the story games movement, which the SJWs loved. I oppose the stuff they like and do it really well, and I'm very good at insulting them and all that. But they really wouldn't have cared that much if it wasn't for the fact that also I've been a huge advocate of not letting them push for censorship in the RPG hobby, right? That's the biggest thing. And then kind of on the third reason is that I'm right wing. I don't think that's really the central problem. I mean, I think maybe if I just was right wing, they would also want to cancel culture me, because they want to cancel culture every right wing person. But what makes me into the boogeyman is really the level of advocacy I have for free speech and the presence I have in the in the online part of the hobby, and how often I've been able to kind of tear down the narrative they tried to build, whether it was with World of Darkness, or with story games, or with the Forge, Swords Fail, any of these things, right? Sorry, Sword Ream, yeah, all of those efforts they have to basically act as parasites of the hobby, I've poked into, right? So when 5th edition came out, they immediately went on the attack, right? They attacked Mike Mearls, they attacked D&D. Originally, they hated D&D 5th edition because it replaced their favorite edition, which was 4th, which they didn't actually play, but it was their favorite because they kind of liked the idea of a game that wasn't actually D&D getting to call itself D&D. It's sort of like, the all-woman Ghostbuster movie. They didn't go to see it, but they loved the idea that it destroyed the fun for, the older fans of Ghostbusters and replaced it with feminist propaganda. It's that sort of stuff. So they only later ended up kind of embracing 5th edition when they saw how popular it was and wanted to make money off it. But at that time, they declared it horrible, and they blamed part of the horribleness on the consultants, and of course most of it on Mike Mearls, and then they started with the open lies, right? And I know that they said stuff about Zack. Now, later on, there have been some very serious allegations of things Zack has done. Most of what they said at that time had nothing to do with the allegations that Zack has faced now, right? Those are two different things, right? Most of the stuff that they claimed about him harassing trans people on the internet has nothing to do with the accusation that he physically and emotionally abused his partner of a decade, right? Those are two different things. In fact, they brutally attacked Mandy, right? Zak's girlfriend in question, right? They were horrible to her. And now, apparently, some of the times that Mandy was responding, it was actually just Zack using her as a sock puppet, which, if true, is really, really cruddy, right? But they didn't know that. They had no way to know that, right? As far as they knew, it was her, and they were just ruthless with her, in spite of the fact that Mandy has a very well-known chronic illness and they were merciless. And as far as for me, they made up all this nonsense, and in many cases were just openly, blatantly lying, right? For example, that morbidly obese sack of crap Bruce Baugh, he made the claim that I had been opposed to the inclusive language in the D&D's player handbook. He pulled it right out of his massive ass, right? His massive diabetic ass, because he had he had no basis for making that claim at all, right? And then, in fact, I immediately said, that's not true. I think it's perfectly fine what they wrote there, right? And he knew it, and then he just kept saying it. He just decided to completely ignore what I was saying because, I'm the pipe smoking man bad, right? So obviously his fantasy that he created in his own head meant to take me down is more truthy than the actual truth, which is that I had no problem with what he was, with what he claimed I had a problem with. And obviously a whole bunch of people, mostly people from RPGNet and from Something Awful, decided, some from Your Dungeon is Suck, decided to spread it around, right? And to try to promote this idea that I was, somehow trying to oppose the inclusiveness of D&D of the D&D text, right? And a bunch of other stuff. So eventually, Mike was, I don't know if he was told to do it or if he did it himself. I think probably he did it himself because, he wanted to give due attention to any complaints. He began a kind of investigation where he asked people if they had any concrete instances of abuse, harassment, or other bad behavior from any of the consultants, that they should write to him. And here's where, this accusation against him comes in. The accusation that, as far as I understand, was started on Something Awful after Mike Mearls stated very publicly that he received no credible accusations. All the accusations he received were just like third-hand accounts of these people were mean to somebody on the internet, and nothing that would even vaguely resemble targeted harassment or abuse, right? Like serious sort of charges. It was the RPGPundit said bad words and called us swine, and Zak S, picked on us, right? Stuff like that. And so after that, the Something Awful people just decide to invent this story. As far as I can tell, that's the case, right? They just literally invented it. That Mike Mearls collected the complaints and then talked to us and gave us the names of the people who made the complaints so that we could harass them, right? And this is absolute unmitigated bullshit, at least as far as I know, in every context. And now here's the thing. When Mearls gave his conclusion to his report, because really me and Zach were the two that were affected, this was one of the only instances where he did a kind of a group email, right? Normally, like I said, he worked with Zach and then he worked with me, but we didn't all work together or something like that when we were helping to design 5th edition. Zach was doing his thing with Mike, I was doing my thing with Mike, right? It was only at this endpoint that, after this investigation, that he gave the final details of this investigation to myself and Zach. And in what I mean by the final details is he sent us an email where he said, you guys, I've taken a look at everything, and from what I can see, there is nothing here that is directly condemnatory in any way, that would actually be any kind of a problem. It's just people rumor mongering, allegations that have no basis, or people stating that we were kind of mean, right? And that's it. But he didn't give us, he didn't say, oh, here's a mailing list of the people. But he didn't give us the addresses of the people that sent it to him. He didn't tell us all of that. At least I can absolutely, with absolute certainty say that with me, that was the limit of what Mearls said in private to me about this, right? He said that, he knew that he didn't think that it was ever going to be anything meaningful, but he opened up the thing to see because it was important, and we said, yeah, fine, whatever. And he did it, and then he concluded that there was nothing, that it was a nothing burger. There was nothing there. And that was the end of it as far as I'm concerned. Now, I can't absolutely 100% avow that Zach didn't then write to him and Mike Mearls sent him a list of targets back. But this is so contrary to anything I imagine Mike doing. And again, I'm not exactly a good friend of Mike Mearls now, because Mike has kind of, he's disavowed me for the sake of his job, right? He doesn't contact me, he doesn't write to me, because he knows that would just create more problems for him. So So I'm not saying any of this to protect Mike Mearls. I'm saying all this basically in defense of the truth, and because I was there and because I was involved. And in that involvement, the suggestion that Zach was given this list of this hit list of names is what would imply that I was also given this hit list of names and that I was happy about that, right? Like, of course, if he had said something like, if anyone had said something like that, I would have found that extremely inappropriate, right? And I certainly wouldn't have, gone and harassed anyone, of course. And I think that the key in the falseness of this allegation is this suggestion that that this happened, and then, well, but who was harassed because of that? Nobody, right? The people who were insulted or attacked by myself or by Zach or by people who are fans of myself or fans of Zach are the people who were publicly attacking us, right? Whether in Zach's case it was, I don't know, Anita Hill or whoever, or in my case it was Bruce Baugh, or in both of our cases it was, what's her name, Sarah Dark Magic or whatever she calls herself, those people were publicly attacking us, so we were publicly responding. That was it. And I don't know if they were the ones or if it was other people who sent in allegations, but certainly there was nobody. I did not get a single name from Mike Mearls, and I don't think Zach did either. And that's what I wanted to clarify here, because I think it's important. It's important mostly for me to say it. Because again, I don't care too much what's going on with Zach. He has later on built his own scaffold that he's planning to hang himself off or something. I don't know what he's done, but he's it's not looking good for him, and he's spent the last many months in hiding. I guess since around the time that his scandal broke out, and Mearls has had to spend the same amount of time. Like, we haven't seen him tweet since, I think, February or something like that. He's had to hide away in the offices of Wizards of the Coast in a desperate bid to save his job, because that all the real SJWs are banging at his doors, at the doors of his office, trying to break in and overthrow him, and usher in the grand new era that they have planned of diversity once he's gone. That will probably mean the destruction of D&D as a game. And meanwhile, I've written 1,000 pages, published 1,000 pages of gaming material in the last months, in the last 10 months or so since this all happened. So I guess I won. That's everything for today. Please share this video anywhere that you think it'll be interesting, controversial, that people will like it or hate it. And please subscribe and click the notification bell. And if you want to support me, well, there's some options in the description below. Check it all out. Besides PayPal or Patreon or stuff like that, you can check out some of the 1,000-some pages of gaming material that I've published in the past year in the form of the RPG Pundit Presents series. So take a look. You'll find something there that you can game with, and it's cheap, and it's a good way to support me. But mainly, share this video, and thank you very much. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Poker plus Blue Boar.